I was pouring sweet tea into the family crystal glasses when my phone buzzed violently on the counter. Unknown caller. Seconds later, my lawyer's name flashed across the screen in a text. Margaret, call me immediately. Do not let Sabrina out of your sight. The silver serving fork slipped from my hand and hit the dining room floor with a dull clang. My heart pounded. My hands shook. I could hear Sabrina in the kitchen, humming softly, as if tonight were just another peaceful family dinner. I called Robert. What he told me shattered 40 years of maternal instinct in seconds. The woman your son married, she's under federal investigation. And Margaret, she forged documents related to the family estate, including the will, including the jewels. My body went cold. Across the table sat my only son, Andrew, smiling, tired, hopeful, about to raise a toast in the home I helped him buy, next to the woman who called me Mom Pierce, with tears in her eyes when they got engaged. And all I could think was, how did I not see this coming? When Andrew first introduced me to Sabrina, I thought she was heaven sent. After losing his father to cancer 5 years earlier, my son had retreated into himself, throwing himself into his accounting firm and barely maintaining a social life. I worried about him constantly, wondering if he'd ever find someone to share his life with. Then, at a hospital fundraiser last spring, there she was, Sabrina Hayes, a pediatric nurse with warm brown eyes and a laugh that could light up the darkest corner of any room. "Mom, this is Sabrina," Andrew said, his face flushed with an excitement I hadn't seen in years. "We met at St. Mary's when I was handling their audit." She extended her hand with a gentle confidence. "It's so wonderful to finally meet you, Mrs. Pierce. Andrew talks about you constantly." "Please call me Margaret," I said, immediately charmed by her sincerity. That night, as we shared a table at the gala, I watched how she leaned in when Andrew spoke, how she touched his arm in just the right moments, how she remembered every detail of the stories he told. For the first time since James died, I saw my son truly smile again. Not the polite, professional smile he wore like armor, but the genuine one that crinkled the corners of his eyes just like his father's had. Over the following months, Sabrina became a fixture in our lives. She brought homemade casseroles when she visited. She asked about family recipes. She even helped me organize the attic one rainy Sunday, sitting cross-legged among dusty boxes as I shared stories about each family photograph we uncovered. "You've kept everything so beautifully preserved," she marveled, carefully handling a black and white portrait of my grandparents. "These are treasures, Margaret. Real family treasures." "Speaking of treasures," I said, reaching for a small velvet box tucked in the corner of an old steamer trunk. "These have been in the Pierce family for generations." Inside lay my grandmother's sapphire necklace and matching earrings, alongside several antique brooches and rings that had passed through the women of our family since the 1880s. The afternoon light caught the deep blue stones, sending little prisms dancing across the attic walls. Sabrina's breath caught. "They're exquisite," she whispered, not touching them without permission. "I've never seen anything so beautiful." "They're meant to stay in the family," I explained, carefully closing the box. "Someday they'll belong to Andrew's wife." Her eyes met mine, something unreadable flickering across her face before she smiled. Any woman would be honored to receive such a legacy. 6 months later, Andrew proposed. He used his grandmother's ring, a modest diamond surrounded by tiny pearls, and Sabrina cried genuine tears when he slipped it onto her finger. The wedding was small but lovely, held in the garden of our family home where Andrew had grown up. Sabrina wore a simple white dress and carried wildflowers, and when she said, "I do," I felt James's presence beside me, approving of our son's choice. "Mom Pierce," she said at the reception, using the nickname she'd coined weeks earlier, "would you mind if I borrowed the sapphires for our honeymoon? Something old, something blue." Her eyes sparkled with excitement. "I promise I'll take better care of them than I take care of my own heartbeat." How could I refuse? The jewels were meant for family celebrations, and what better celebration than a honeymoon? I retrieved the velvet box from my safe deposit box the following day and handed it to her with complete trust. "These mean the world to me," I said, placing them in her hands. "They're not just valuable, they're our history." She hugged me tightly. "I know exactly what they mean to you. I'll guard them with my life." After the honeymoon, 2 weeks in the Greek islands, Andrew and Sabrina moved into a small colonial-style house just 3 miles from mine. Close enough for Sunday dinners, yet far enough for their privacy. Sabrina brought back the jewels as promised, though she suggested I might want to consider different storage options. A bank? Vault is so impersonal, she said over coffee one morning. And it's such a hassle when you want to wear them. Have you thought about a home safe? Andrew and I are installing one for our important papers. We could help you set one up too. That's thoughtful of you, dear. But I've always kept them at the bank. It was good enough for my mother and her mother before her. Sabrina nodded, though something in her expression suggested disappointment. Well, if you ever change your mind, let us know. We just want what's best for you. And the family treasures. As the months passed, Sabrina grew even more integrated into our small family circle. She suggested I sell my house, the 4-bedroom colonial where I'd raised Andrew, and move into a condo closer to them. It's so much maintenance for you, Mom Pierce, she said, concern etched on her face. And those stairs can't be good for your knees. Wouldn't it be wonderful to have a single-level place with security and maintenance included? She had a point. At 68, I wasn't as nimble as I once was, and the house did sometimes feel cavernous for just one person. Still, I hesitated. This was the home where James and I had built our life together, where Andrew had taken his first steps, where every doorframe held pencil marks tracking his growth. I'll think about it, I promised, though the thought of leaving filled me with a quiet dread. Meanwhile, I noticed subtle changes in Andrew. He called less frequently. When we did speak, Sabrina was usually within earshot. He mentioned that they were thinking of consolidating their finances for simplicity's sake, and that Sabrina had suggested he take a more active role in managing my accounts as well. She's worried about you, Mom, he explained during one of our increasingly rare private conversations. We both are. You're not getting any younger, and we want to make sure everything's in order. I'm only 68, Andrew, I reminded him, trying to keep my tone light. My mother lived to 92, and she managed her own checkbook until the very end. He looked uncomfortable. I know, but things are more complicated now. There's online banking, automatic payments. Sabrina thinks it would be easier if we helped you streamline everything. I changed the subject, but his words lingered in my mind. When had my capable, independent son started prefacing his concerns with Sabrina thinks? It wasn't until Thanksgiving that the first real warning bell sounded. I was in the kitchen, checking on the turkey, when I overheard them arguing in hushed tones on the back porch. You promised you'd talk to her about it, Sabrina hissed. The market is perfect right now. If she sells that house, we could— I know what we discussed, Andrew interrupted, his voice uncharacteristically sharp. But I can't push her. That house means everything to her. More than your future, more than our children's future. Their voices dropped even lower, and I moved away, unsettled by the edge in Sabrina's tone, so different from the warm, patient woman I thought I knew. That night, as I put away the leftovers, Sabrina approached me with a cup of tea and her usual sweet smile. I was thinking, Mom Pierce, she said casually, maybe I could borrow the sapphires for Christmas. They'd be perfect with that navy dress for the firm's holiday party. Of course, dear, I said automatically. I'll get them from the bank next week. But as I drove home that evening, something didn't feel right. The argument I'd overheard, the increasing pressure about my house, the subtle isolation from Andrew. And now, another request for the jewels. For the first time, I wondered if I'd been too trusting. The morning after Thanksgiving, I called Robert Wilson, the family attorney who had handled the Pierce estate since before Andrew was born. Robert wasn't just our lawyer. He was an old friend of James's from college days, a confidant who had helped me navigate the complexity of widowhood. Margaret, what can I do for you? He asked, his deep voice familiar and reassuring. I need to talk about Andrew and Sabrina, I said, keeping my voice low despite being alone in my house. And about the family jewels. Is everything all right? I'm not sure, I admitted. It's probably nothing, but I'd like to review my will, make sure everything is properly documented. And I'd like to discuss some concerns. He suggested lunch the following Tuesday at Bellamy's, a quiet restaurant downtown where we could speak privately. I spent the weekend pretending everything was normal, even joining Andrew and Sabrina for a movie on Sunday afternoon. Sabrina was her usual charming self, bringing me a cashmere scarf just because, and insisting on making hot cocoa when we returned to their house afterward. Andrew mentioned your meeting with Robert on Tuesday, she said casually as she stirred the chocolate on the stove. Anything important? I felt a chill that had nothing to do with the December air. How did she know about my appointment? Just routine estate planning, I said, matching her casual tone. At my age, it's good to review things periodically. She nodded, back to me. Smart. You know, my uncle is a financial advisor who specializes in estate planning. He could give you a second opinion if you'd like. That's thoughtful, but Robert has handled our family affairs for decades. I trust him completely. She turned, smiling as she handed me the steaming mug. Of course. Just thought I'd offer. When Tuesday arrived, I dressed carefully in a navy suit that James had always said made me look distinguished. I wanted to feel strong, confident, even though my concerns felt nebulous, almost silly when I tried to articulate them. Robert was already seated when I arrived, his silver hair neatly combed, his tie precisely knotted as always. He stood to greet me with a warm hug. You look wonderful, Margaret, he said, pulling out my chair. Liar, I replied with a small smile, but thank you for saying so. After ordering salmon for him, chicken salad for me, I began sharing my concerns. The subtle pressure to sell my house, the comments about managing my finances, the increasing isolation from Andrew, and finally, the repeated requests for the family jewels. Robert listened without interruption, his expression giving nothing away. When I finished, he sat back, fingers steepled beneath his chin, a gesture so reminiscent of James that my heart ached. Have you had the jewels appraised recently? He asked. The question surprised me. Not since James had it done for insurance purposes about 10 years ago. Why? What was their value then? Around $380,000, I believe. The sapphire set alone was valued at $220,000. They're Georgian. Era, quite rare. Robert nodded slowly. And they're currently in your safe deposit box? Yes. Sabrina has asked to borrow them for Christmas, though. He reached for his water glass, took a deliberate sip. Before you lend them again, I'd like to verify something. Last month, a document came across my desk, a request to update your insurance policy. It listed the jewels as being permanently transferred to Andrew and Sabrina as a wedding gift. My stomach dropped. That's not true. I lent them for the honeymoon, but I never gave them as a gift. The document had your signature, Margaret. That's impossible. I never signed anything like that. Robert's expression remained professionally neutral, but I could see concern in his eyes. The signature looked authentic enough that our office processed it. I only noticed because I happened to be reviewing insurance matters for another client and saw your name. My hands trembled slightly as I reached for my water. Someone forged my signature? But why would... I couldn't finish the thought. Let's not jump to conclusions, Robert said gently. There could be a misunderstanding, but I'd like to take some precautions. He suggested. I retrieved the jewels from the bank immediately, photograph and document each piece, and store them somewhere unexpected. Not in my home safe, not in another bank, but somewhere only I would know. And Margaret, he added, lowering his voice, don't tell Andrew or Sabrina that you've moved them. Say you'll get them before Christmas as planned, but that the bank has implemented new security. Procedures that might cause delays. You think my own daughter-in-law would steal from me? The words felt bitter on my tongue. I think we need more information before making any judgments, which is why I'd like your permission to do some discreet research into Sabrina's background. I hesitated, loyalty to Andrew warring with growing unease. What kind of research? Basic due diligence. Employment verification, education credentials, previous residences, nothing invasive. Andrew would be furious if he knew. Then we'll make sure he doesn't know, unless we find something concerning. That afternoon, I drove to the bank, my mind racing with possibilities, each more disturbing than the last. The safe deposit box key felt heavy in my hand as I followed the bank manager to the vault. It's been a while, Mrs. Pierce, he commented as he inserted his key alongside mine. Almost a year, I believe. I froze. What do you mean? I was here in August when I lent the jewels to my daughter-in-law for her honeymoon. He checked the access log. No, your last visit was December 5th of last year, almost exactly a year ago. That's impossible, I insisted. I specifically remember. Coming in August. The manager's expression shifted to concern. Mrs. Pierce, according to our records, you haven't accessed this box since last December. However, your son and his wife were here in August. They presented the necessary authorization letter with your signature. The room seemed to tilt beneath my feet. My son and his wife accessed my safe deposit box? Without me? Yes, ma'am. With your written authorization. Would you like me to pull the form? I nodded numbly, following him back to his office where he retrieved a file. There it was, my signature, authorizing Andrew and Sabrina Pierce to access my safe deposit box in my absence. A signature I had never written. With trembling hands, I opened the box once the manager left me alone in the private viewing room. The velvet case was there, exactly where it should be. I snapped it open, half expecting it to be empty. The sapphires gleamed back at me, nestled in their satin lining. Relief washed over me, until I looked closer. The deep blue stones didn't catch the light quite right. The setting looked slightly different than I remembered. With growing horror, I examined the other pieces. The Victorian brooches, the emerald ring that had been my great-grandmother's. They were all there, and they were all fakes. The drive home from the bank passed in a blur. My hands gripped the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white, and twice I had to pull over when tears blurred my vision. The velvet case sat on the passenger seat beside me, containing perfect replicas of my family's legacy, beautiful lies, crafted with meticulous attention to detail. When I finally reached my driveway, I sat in the car for several long minutes, trying to compose myself. I couldn't let Andrew or Sabrina suspect that I knew. Not yet. Not until I understood the full scope of what I was facing. I called Robert from my car, my voice barely above a whisper. "They're fakes," I said without preamble. "All of them. Perfect. Counterfeits." A heavy silence filled the line before he responded. "Are you absolutely certain? The sapphire's color is slightly off. The setting on my great-grandmother's ring has been simplified. They're good fakes, excellent ones, but they're not the originals." My voice broke. "And Robert," the bank manager showed me an authorization form with my forged signature. "They accessed my safe deposit box in August." "Don't confront them," he said firmly. "Not yet. I'm going to expedite our investigation. In the meantime, secure those replicas somewhere safe. We'll need them as evidence." That night, I tucked the velvet case into an old shoebox, which I hid in the attic behind a stack of Christmas decorations. Then I took 2 aspirin for my pounding headache and tried to sleep, my mind racing, with questions. How long had they been planning this? Was their entire relationship a calculated scheme? Had my son been duped as thoroughly as I had, or was he somehow involved? The thought of Andrew's complicity made me physically ill, but I forced myself to consider every possibility. The authorization form had listed both their names. The bank manager had said they came together. Either Andrew was part of the deception, or Sabrina had manipulated him into accompanying her without understanding the true purpose. I desperately wanted to believe the latter. The next morning, my phone rang just after 7. It was Robert. "I need you to come to my office immediately," he said, his voice taut with urgency. "Don't call Andrew. Don't tell anyone where you're going." An hour later, I sat across from him in his wood-paneled office as he slid a folder across his desk. "We hired a specialist," he explained, "someone who could work quickly and discreetly. What he found is concerning." The folder contained a detailed background report on Sabrina Hayes, or rather on the woman who called herself Sabrina Hayes. According to the investigator, no Sabrina Hayes matching her age and description had graduated from Johns Hopkins Nursing School, as she claimed. No Sabrina Hayes had worked at the hospitals listed on her resume before St. Mary's. Her social security number belonged to a woman who had died in infancy 32 years ago. "This isn't possible," I whispered, flipping through the pages with growing horror. Andrew would have verified her credentials before they married. He's meticulous about these things. "There's more," Robert said gently, turning to the last page of the report. The investigator found 3 similar cases in different states over the past 7 years. Different names, different backgrounds, but the same pattern. A woman ingratiates herself with a wealthy family, gains their trust, arranges access to valuables or accounts, then disappears. Denver in 2017, Atlanta in 2019, Seattle in 2021. He placed 3 photographs on the desk, each showing the same woman, Sabrina, with different hair colors and styles, alongside different men. My stomach clenched. "The Seattle victim was hit particularly hard," Robert continued. "Lost nearly $600,000 in family heirlooms and liquid assets before she vanished. He pressed charges, but by then she had disappeared completely. Resurfaced 6 months later in Chicago with yet another identity, but vanished before authorities could apprehend her. And now she's married to my son," I said, my voice hollow. "Yes, and based on the financial documents we've reviewed, she's been methodically positioning herself to access your estate. The jewels were likely just the beginning. I thought of the pressure to sell my house, to consolidate accounts, to update my will. It had all been leading somewhere, somewhere calculated and devastating. Does Andrew know? I asked, the question that had been haunting me since yesterday. Robert's expression softened. We don't have evidence either way yet. The most charitable interpretation is that he's another victim, that she's manipulated him as thoroughly as she. Has you? But Margaret? He hesitated. We need to consider all possibilities. He's my son, I said fiercely. I know him. People change, and love can blind the most rational among us. I shook my head, unable to accept that Andrew could betray me so fundamentally. What do we do now? I've contacted the FBI. The interstate nature of these crimes falls under their jurisdiction, and they've been tracking this woman, whom they believe is actually named Stephanie Holbrook, for several years. They want to speak with you tomorrow. And tonight? Do I just go home and pretend everything is normal? We're supposed to have dinner at Andrew and Sabrina's house. Go to dinner, Robert advised. Act natural. The FBI wants to catch her in the act, which means we need to give her the opportunity to incriminate herself further. They're particularly interested in the forged documents. She's asked to borrow the jewels again for Christmas, I remembered. Should I agree? Yes. Tell her you'll get them from the bank next week. Let's see what she does. That evening, I applied my makeup with extra care, determined that no trace of my distress would show on my face. I chose a simple black dress and pearl earrings that had been a gift from James on our 30th anniversary, one piece of jewelry that Sabrina hadn't yet managed to get her hands on. Andrew and Sabrina's house was warm and inviting when I arrived, Christmas lights twinkling in the windows, the scent of roasting chicken and herbs filling the air. Sabrina greeted me with her usual enthusiastic hug. Mom Pierce, you look beautiful, she exclaimed, taking my coat. Come in, come in. Andrew's just opening wine. My son emerged from the kitchen, a glass in each hand and a genuine smile lighting his face. Hey, Mom. Glad you could make it. I studied him carefully as I accepted the wine, searching for any sign that he was hiding something, any indication that he knew his wife was a fraud who had stolen our family. Treasures. But all I saw was the same Andrew I'd always known. Honest, slightly reserved, his father's integrity evident in his steady gaze. No, I decided. Whatever Sabrina was doing, she was doing it without my son's knowledge or consent. Dinner was surreal. Sabrina chatting animatedly about hospital gossip, Andrew discussing a challenging client, me responding with appropriate smiles and nods, while screaming internally. How could this woman sit across from me, breaking bread in the home I had helped my son purchase, knowing she had stolen my family's treasures and was actively plotting to take more? Oh, before I forget, Sabrina said as she served apple crisp for dessert. Did you have a chance to check about the sapphires? For the Christmas party? I called the bank today. I replied smoothly. They said I can pick them up next Tuesday. New security protocols, apparently. Perfect, she beamed. The dress I ordered will be delivered Monday. The sapphires will complete the look perfectly. I'm sure they will, I said, forcing a smile. They do look stunning on you. Later, as I was preparing to leave, Sabrina disappeared upstairs to fetch a book she wanted to lend me. Andrew helped me with my coat, his movements gentle as he adjusted the collar. You okay, Mom? He asked quietly. You seem distracted tonight. For a moment, I was tempted to tell him everything, to warn him about the viper he had welcomed into his bed. But Robert's warning echoed in my mind. We needed evidence. We needed to be certain. Just a little tired, I assured him, patting his cheek. Nothing to worry about. You'd tell me if something was wrong, wouldn't you? He pressed, concern etching lines around his eyes. Lines that hadn't been there a year ago, I realized. Of course I would, I lied, hating myself for it. You're my son. I tell you everything. As I drove home, tears finally spilled down my cheeks. Tomorrow I would meet with the FBI. Tomorrow this nightmare would begin, its journey toward resolution. But tonight I had left my only child in the arms of a predator, and I had smiled while doing it. The FBI agents looked nothing like the television stereotypes. Agent Diaz was a petite woman with intelligent eyes and a soft-spoken manner, while Agent Mercer was a middle-aged black man whose rumpled suit couldn't disguise his sharp attention to detail. They met me at Robert's office, where I recounted everything from the beginning, meeting Sabrina, the gradual integration into our lives, the jewels, the forged documents, the mounting pressure about my finances and home. Mrs. Pierce, you've provided us with critical information, Agent Diaz said when I finished. We've been tracking Stephanie Holbrook, the woman you know as Sabrina, for nearly 5 years. She's Sophisticated, patient, and extraordinarily convincing. Each time we've gotten close, she's vanished, leaving devastating financial and emotional damage behind. And my son? Do you think he's involved? I asked, the question that had kept me awake all night. The agents exchanged glances before Agent Mercer responded carefully. At this point, we have no evidence suggesting Mr. Pierce's complicity. In previous cases, Halbrook operated alone, manipulating her romantic partners without their knowledge. However, we'll need to investigate thoroughly before making that determination. We believe your son is another victim, Agent Diaz added gently, but we'll need to verify that independently. They outlined their plan. I would continue as normal, agreeing to Sabrina's requests, while the FBI monitored our interactions. They were particularly interested in how she would respond when I told her I had retrieved the jewels from the bank. The replicas provide us with a unique opportunity, Agent Mercer explained. If she accepts them without comment, knowing they're fakes, it proves her involvement in the original theft. We'll have agents nearby when you hand them over. And if she's already disposed of the originals? I asked, a question that had been haunting me. We're pursuing several leads regarding recent sales of antique jewelry matching your descriptions, Agent Diaz assured me. Pieces this distinctive leave a trail. As I left Robert's office, a text message from Sabrina lit up my phone. Thinking of you today. Want to meet for lunch tomorrow? Have some. Exciting ideas about Christmas decorations for your house. The casual affection, the heart emoji, all part of her calculated performance. I showed the message to Agent Diaz, who nodded. Accept the invitation. Wear this, she said, handing me a small brooch with an intricate silver design. It contains a recording device. We'll be monitoring. The next day, I met Sabrina at Gardenia's, a sunny cafe downtown. She waved enthusiastically when I entered, already seated at a table near the window. I ordered you unsweetened tea, she said as I sat down. With lemon, just how you like it. Such thoughtful attention to detail, the hallmark of her deception. I touched the brooch at my collar, drawing comfort from knowing agents were listening. Thank you, dear. That's very thoughtful. So, she leaned forward conspiratorially. I've been thinking about your house. The market is absolutely perfect right now for selling. My friend Jessica, you remember the realtor I introduced you to at our housewarming, says properties in your neighborhood are going for 20% above asking. Is that so? I kept my tone neutral. Absolutely. And I found the most darling condo community just 10 minutes from us, single-level living, maintenance included, beautiful community spaces. She pulled out her phone, showing me pictures of a modern development with manicured grounds. They even have a unit available on the ground floor, facing the garden. It's perfect for you, Mom Pierce. It does look lovely, I admitted, because it did. Her selections were always impeccable, tailored precisely to appeal to her targets. But I'm not sure I'm ready to leave my home just yet. Her smile dimmed slightly before she recovered. Of course, I understand. It's just, Andrew and I worry about you in that big house all alone, especially as you get older. I appreciate the concern, but I'm quite capable, I said more firmly than I'd allowed myself to speak to her in months. Something flickered in her eyes. Annoyance? Calculation? It vanished so quickly I might have imagined it. Of course you are, she said warmly, reaching across to squeeze my hand. We just want what's best for you. Oh, speaking of what's best, have you had a chance to pick up the sapphires yet? The party is just 2 weeks away. Actually, yes. I got them from the bank yesterday. Her eyes lit up with an eagerness she couldn't quite disguise. Wonderful. I can stop by tomorrow to get them if that works for you. The dress arrived early, and I'd love to try everything together. Why don't you come for tea around 3? I'll have them ready for you. She beamed, radiating such genuine-seeming delight that for a moment I almost doubted what I knew. How could someone fake such warmth so convincingly? Perfect. You're the best, Mom Pierce. The conversation drifted to holiday plans, Andrew's work stress, hospital gossip, all the normal topics that had filled our previous lunches. As we were finishing our meal, Sabrina's phone buzzed with a text. It's Andrew, she said, frowning slightly as she read the message. He's asking if I've talked to you about the estate planning meeting. My heart skipped a beat. Estate planning meeting? She looked up, all innocence. Oh, I thought he'd mentioned it to you already. He's been so worried about making sure everything is in order for you. We found this wonderful estate attorney who specializes in protecting family assets, minimizing taxes, All that complicated stuff. She waved her hand dismissively. Andrew wanted to set up a joint meeting next week to discuss options for your will and investments. I see. I kept my voice steady, though rage bubbled beneath my calm exterior. And why wouldn't Andrew discuss this with me directly? Her smile turned sympathetic, almost condescending. You know how he is. So busy with work, always forgetting the personal touches. I told him I'd handle it more delicately. She reached for my hand again. It's only because we care, Margaret. We want to make sure you're protected. Protected from what? I wondered. From keeping control of my own assets? From maintaining my independence? From seeing through her elaborate scheme? I already have an attorney who handles my estate planning, I said carefully. Robert Wilson has managed the Pierce family affairs for decades. Her expression flickered. Again, that same brief, calculating look. Of course, and he's wonderful. But this new firm has some innovative approaches specifically for jewelry and real estate holdings. It wouldn't hurt to get a second opinion, would it? Jewelry and real estate. Exactly the assets she was targeting. I forced a smile. I suppose not. When is this meeting scheduled? Tuesday at 2. I'll pick you up so you don't have to drive downtown. How convenient, isolating me from independent transportation while introducing me to her accomplices. The trap was closing in, and she thought I was walking right into it. That sounds fine, I lied. I'll mark my calendar. As we parted in the parking lot, she hugged me tightly, her expensive perfume enveloping me. Love you, Mom Pierce. See you tomorrow for tea. I watched her drive away in her sleek silver Audi, purchased, no doubt, with proceeds from previous victims, before touching the brooch at my collar. Did you get all that? I murmured, knowing the agents were listening. Back at home, Agent Diaz called to confirm they had recorded everything and were already investigating the estate attorney Sabrina had mentioned. We believe it's another accomplice, she explained. The firm she's likely referring to doesn't actually exist, at least not legitimately. We're setting up surveillance for tomorrow's tea as well. She's planning to take everything, I said, the reality of it hitting me anew. The jewels were just the beginning. That's her pattern, Agent Diaz confirmed. But this time we're going to stop her before she can disappear. Again. That night, I called Andrew at his office, ostensibly to discuss Thanksgiving plans, but really to gauge his awareness of Sabrina's machinations. Actually, Mom, I've been meaning to talk to you about next week, he said, after we'd chatted about turkey recipes. Sabrina found this great estate planning attorney who has some ideas about protecting your assets long term. I thought maybe we could all meet with him together. The same story, almost word for word. My son wasn't complicit. He was being manipulated, fed lines and ideas by a woman who had studied him carefully enough to know exactly how to use his love for me against both of us. Sabrina mentioned that, I said carefully. She's very thoughtful. She really is, he agreed, and the genuine admiration in his voice broke my heart. I don't know what I did to deserve her, Mom. She takes care of everything. Me, the house, worrying about you and your future. I've never met anyone so selfless. Never met anyone so calculating, I thought, but didn't say. She's certainly one of a kind, I replied instead. The morning of my tea with Sabrina dawned cold and gray, with a fine mist hanging over the garden. I dressed carefully, in a sage green sweater that James had always loved, fastening Agent Diaz's recording brooch at my collar. The velvet case containing the fake jewel sat on my vanity, a glittering trap waiting to be sprung. Agent Mercer called shortly before noon. We'll have plainclothes officers positioned across the street and in a car parked 3 houses down, he explained. Agent Diaz will be posing as a package delivery person around 3:15, which will give us an opportunity to have someone close by. Your phone line and the recording device will be monitored continuously. And when she takes the replicas? I asked, my stomach nodding at the thought of the confrontation to come. Let her leave with them. We need to establish intent. Once she's accepted them knowing they're fakes, we'll have proof of her involvement in the original theft. I spent the next hours in a state of controlled anxiety, arranging a tea tray with the porcelain service James's mother had given us as a wedding gift, positioning almond cookies on a silver plate, maintaining the illusion of normalcy while my heart raced. At precisely 3 o'clock, the doorbell rang. Sabrina stood on my porch, radiant in a cream cashmere coat, her dark hair falling in perfect waves around her shoulders. She held a small bouquet of winter flowers. These reminded me of you, she said, handing them to me with a warm smile. Elegant and timeless. How thoughtful, I replied, accepting them with what I hoped looked like genuine pleasure. Come in. The tea is ready. She followed me to the living room, complimenting the holiday. Decorations I'd begun to arrange, another performance in her endless repertoire of thoughtful observations. As I poured the tea, her eyes darted around the room, lingering momentarily on the velvet case I'd deliberately left visible on the side table. Are those the sapphires? She asked, her casual tone not quite masking her eagerness. Yes, I thought I'd have them ready for you. I handed her a cup of tea. Lemon, no sugar, correct? Perfect, as always. She took a delicate sip. You remember everything. So do you, I thought. Every detail calculated to build trust, to create the illusion of genuine connection. We chatted about holiday plans, about Andrew's work stress, about a patient Sabrina had supposedly grown attached to, all the normal topics that had filled our previous visits. After about 15 minutes, she set down her teacup and glanced meaningfully at the velvet case. May I? She asked, already reaching for it. Of course. I watched carefully as she opened the case. If she recognized the jewels as fakes, which she surely would, having orchestrated their replacement, she gave no sign. Instead, she lifted the sapphire necklace with an expression of exaggerated awe. They're even more beautiful than I remembered, she murmured, holding the necklace up to catch the light. The craftsmanship is extraordinary. They've been in the Pierce family for generations, I said, my voice steady despite the anger churning inside me. My great-grandmother wore that necklace to meet Queen Victoria. And now I'll wear it to the hospital Christmas party, she said with a laugh that sounded genuinely delighted. From Buckingham Palace to St. Mary's Banquet Hall, quite a journey. She carefully returned the necklace to its velvet nest and closed the case, slipping it into her designer handbag. I'll guard these with my life, I promise, and I'll return them right after the party. No, you won't, I thought, because you already stole the real ones and replaced them with these fakes. The charade was both infuriating and heartbreaking. I know you will, I said, forcing warmth into my voice. They look stunning on you. She beamed, reaching over to squeeze my hand. Thank you for trusting me with them. That means the world to me. The irony of her words made my chest ache. As she prepared to leave, she mentioned the estate planning meeting again. Don't forget, Tuesday at 2. I'll pick you up around 1:30. No need to bring anything. The attorney has all the necessary documents prepared. I'm sure he does, I thought grimly. All ready for me to sign over everything I own. I'll be ready, I promised. She hugged me goodbye, her expensive perfume enveloping me one final time. Love you, Mom Pierce. See you Tuesday. I watched from the window as she walked to her car, the velvet case containing the fake jewels tucked securely in her bag. She never looked back, never suspected that her carefully constructed world was about to collapse. 20 minutes after she left, Agent Diaz arrived, removing the delivery person's uniform jacket she'd been wearing. We got it all, she confirmed. She accepted the replicas without hesitation, knowing they weren't the originals. What happens now? I asked, suddenly exhausted from the strain of maintaining my performance. Now we move to the next phase. We've identified the estate attorney she mentioned. He's been involved in at least 2 of her previous scams. The firm's website was created just 3 weeks ago, and the office address is a virtual suite. We'll be ready when you arrive for that meeting. She explained that they needed one more piece of evidence. Sabrina attempting to use forged documents to gain control of my assets. The meeting on Tuesday would provide that opportunity. We'll arrest them both at the office, she explained, but we need you to play along until the last moment. Can you do that? I thought of Andrew, my son, my only child, and how devastated he would be when the truth was revealed. I thought of the decades of trust and love that Sabrina had exploited so callously. Yes, I said firmly. I can do that. The weekend passed in a blur of anxiety and preparation. I met with Robert and the FBI agents repeatedly, reviewing the plan for Tuesday's confrontation. Andrew called twice, each time mentioning how excited Sabrina was about the estate planning meeting, how it would solve all our concerns about your future security, Mom. Each conversation broke my heart anew. He genuinely believed they were helping me. On Sunday evening, they invited me to dinner. I almost declined, unable to bear another performance, but Agent Diaz insisted it was important to maintain normal patterns. Any deviation might make her suspicious, she warned. So I went, carrying a bottle of wine and a forced smile. Andrew grilled steaks while Sabrina prepared a salad, both of them moving around their kitchen with the easy familiarity of a happy couple. Watching them, I could almost believe in the life they'd constructed. The loving marriage, the devoted daughter-in-law, the close-knit family. But then Sabrina would say something, a casual reference to my house's value, a seemingly innocent question about my banking arrangements, and the illusion would shatter, revealing the calculated predator beneath the warm facade. "Oh!" she exclaimed as we finished dessert. "I almost forgot to tell you. I tried on the dress with the sapphires, and they're absolutely perfect together. Would you like to see a photo?" She pulled out her phone, showing me a selfie where she posed in a midnight blue evening gown, my family's fake sapphires gleaming at her throat. The real ones were probably already sold, the proceeds hidden in some offshore account. "Beautiful," I managed to say. "They were meant for you." Her smile widened, satisfied with my apparent surrender to her manipulations. That's what I told Andrew. Some things just feel destined, don't they? Later, as Andrew walked me to my car, he hugged me tightly. "Thanks for coming tonight, Mom, and for being so supportive of everything. I know change can be hard. I just want you to be happy," I said, meaning it with all my heart. "I am happy," he assured me, glancing back at the house where Sabrina waited in the warm light of the doorway. "Happier than I've been since Dad died." I touched his cheek, gently, memorizing the moment. By Tuesday evening, his world would be shattered, his trust broken, his heart devastated. I wanted to warn him, to protect him from what was coming, but I knew I couldn't. Some wounds can't be prevented, only healed afterward. "I love you, Andrew," I said softly. "Never forget that." He looked slightly puzzled by my intensity. "I love you too, Mom. Are you okay?" "I'm fine," I lied, just feeling a little sentimental tonight. As I drove home, I allowed myself to cry for the first time since discovering the theft, not for the jewels, which were just objects despite their sentimental value, but for my son, for the pain that was coming, for the betrayal that would change him forever. Monday passed in a haze of final preparations. I spoke with Agent Mercer. Twice, confirming details for the following day. I met with Robert to review the genuine estate planning documents we'd prepared as cover, documents that would never be signed. And I tried, unsuccessfully, not to count the hours until my son's heart would be broken beyond repair. Tuesday dawned bright and cold, sunlight glinting off frost-covered gardens. I dressed with particular care in a charcoal gray suit with a silk blouse, professional, dignified armor against what was to come. Agent Diaz's brooch was pinned securely at my collar, and a small, unobtrusive earpiece had been provided, so the FBI team could communicate with me if necessary. At precisely 1:30, Sabrina's silver Audi pulled into my driveway. She waved cheerfully through the windshield, looking every inch the devoted. Daughter-in-law in a cream-colored coat and burgundy scarf. "Ready for this?" she asked as I settled into the passenger seat. "I promise it won't be too boring. Stanley, the attorney, is really good at explaining complex things simply." "I'm looking forward to it," I replied, clutching my handbag where I'd placed several family photos, including one of James. I needed his strength today. During the drive downtown, Sabrina chattered about the Christmas party preparations, about a patient's recovery, about Andrew's latest work triumph, all the normal topics that had comprised our conversations for months. If she noticed my occasional one-word responses or distracted nods, she gave no sign. "Here we are," she announced, pulling up to a sleek office building in the financial district. Andrew's meeting us inside. He had a client meeting nearby, so he came straight from work. The elevator carried us to the 12th floor, where gold lettering on smoked glass announced, "Barrett Financial Planning and Estate Services." A receptionist greeted Sabrina by name, clearly part of the operation, and led us to a conference room where Andrew and a distinguished-looking man in his 60s waited. "Mom!" Andrew stood to embrace me. "Glad you could make it. This is Stanley Barrett, the attorney I was telling you about." "Mrs. Pierce," the man said smoothly, extending his hand. "A pleasure to meet you. Your son has told me so much about you." "I'm sure he has," I thought grimly, noting the expensive watch, the too perfect silver hair, the practiced smile that never reached his eyes. This was no legitimate attorney, but a con artist as skilled as Sabrina herself. "Shall we get started?" Barrett gestured to the leather chairs surrounding a polished conference table. "I've prepared some preliminary documents based on Andrew and Sabrina's concerns about streamlining your estate management." For the next 30 minutes, I listened as Barrett outlined an elaborate plan that would, in essence, transfer control of my entire estate to Andrew and Sabrina for simplified management and tax purposes. The house would be placed in a trust with them as trustees. My investments would be consolidated into accounts they could access in case of emergency. Family heirlooms would be officially documented as inter vivos gifts to avoid future estate taxes. It was breathtaking in its audacity, a complete dismantling of my financial independence disguised as prudent planning. Of course, you'd retain the right to live in your home, Barrett assured me with a paternal smile. This is simply about making things easier as you age. And about protecting the family legacy, Sabrina added earnestly, ensuring nothing gets lost in probate or eaten up by taxes. Andrew nodded, completely convinced. Mom, I know it sounds complicated, but we've reviewed everything carefully. This really is the best approach for everyone. Barrett slid a thick stack of documents across the table. If you're comfortable proceeding, we can execute these today. I have a notary on staff. I glanced at the top document, a power of attorney form that would give Andrew and Sabrina complete control over my financial decisions. My hand trembled slightly as I reached for the pen. Before I sign, I said carefully, I'd like to clarify a few points. Of course, Barrett said smoothly. That's why we're here. The sapphire jewelry set that's been in my family for generations, these documents list them as already gifted to Sabrina. Is that correct? A flicker of tension crossed Sabrina's face before her. Smile reasserted itself. We discussed that, remember? When you gave them to me after the wedding? This just formalizes what you've already done. I see. I turned a page deliberately. And my house. This transfers ownership immediately, rather than upon my death? It's a living trust, Barrett explained. More flexible than a will, more protected from potential challenges. And who would have access to my bank accounts under this arrangement? Andrew and Sabrina would be co-signatories, he replied. Strictly for emergency purposes, of course. I nodded slowly, as if considering. And if I were to die unexpectedly, what happens then? Everything would transfer seamlessly to Andrew and Sabrina as the designated trustees and beneficiaries, Barrett said. No probate, no delays, no complications. How convenient for them, I thought. I just have one more question, I said, looking directly at Sabrina. When did you first decide to steal my family's jewels and replace them with fakes? The conference room went deadly silent. Sabrina's smile froze, her eyes widening momentarily before her composure reasserted itself. Mom, what are you talking about? Andrew asked, confusion evident in his voice. I'm talking about the fact that the sapphires Sabrina is so proudly planning to wear to her Christmas party are counterfeits, I said, my voice steady despite my racing heart. The real ones were stolen from my safe deposit box in August, using a forged authorization letter with my signature. Sabrina laughed, though I could see panic building behind her eyes. Margaret, that's absurd. You gave me the jewels yourself just yesterday. I gave you the fakes, I corrected her. The same fakes you put in my safe deposit box after stealing the originals. The bank has security footage of you and Andrew accessing my box on August 12th, footage I've reviewed personally. Andrew's face had gone pale. Mom, what are you saying? Sabrina wouldn't... We wouldn't... Barrett started, gathering the documents, his movements controlled but urgent. I think we should reschedule this meeting when everyone is feeling more rational. That won't be necessary, Mr. Barrett, I said, rising to my feet. Or should I call you by your real name? James Morrison? The same name you used in Denver and Atlanta? The door to the conference room burst open, and Agents Diaz and Mercer entered, flanked by 2 uniformed officers. FBI, Agent Mercer announced, displaying his badge. James Morrison and Stephanie Hallbrook, you're under arrest for fraud, identity theft, and conspiracy. Stephanie? Andrew looked at Sabrina in complete confusion. What's happening? Sabrina's transformation was instantaneous and chilling. The warm, devoted facade vanished, replaced by cold calculation as she assessed her options. She glanced at the second door across the room, clearly considering flight. Don't, Agent Diaz warned, noting the look. The building is surrounded. As the officers moved to handcuff Barrett Morrison, Sabrina made a desperate lunge toward her handbag on the conference table. Agent Mercer intercepted her, securing her wrists behind her back as she struggled. You can't prove anything, she hissed, all pretense abandoned. It's her word against mine. Actually, Agent Diaz said, we have substantial evidence, including your acceptance of jewelry you knew to be counterfeit, forged documents with Mrs. Pierce's signature, and communications with known associates regarding the sale of stolen antique jewelry. Your previous victims in Denver, Atlanta, and Seattle have also provided statements. Andrew had sunk back into his chair, his face ashen. Previous victims? He whispered. Sabrina didn't even look at him. Her focus was entirely on self-preservation now, her eyes calculating even as the handcuffs clicked around her wrists. I want a lawyer, she said coldly. You'll need one, Agent Mercer replied, reading her rights as he guided her toward the door. As they led Sabrina and Barrett away, I moved to my son's side. He was staring blankly at the conference table, his world visibly crumbling around him. Andrew, I said gently, placing my hand on his shoulder. He flinched away from my touch. You knew, he said, his voice hollow. You knew and you didn't tell me. You let me bring you here, let me participate in whatever this was. I only found out last week, I explained. The FBI asked me not to say anything until they had gathered enough evidence. Evidence against my wife? His laugh was bitter, broken. My wife, who apparently doesn't even exist. Agent Diaz approached cautiously. Mr. Pierce, I know this is overwhelming, but we'd like to ask you some questions when you're ready. You think I was part of it, he said flatly. You think I helped her steal from my own mother. We need to establish the facts, she replied diplomatically. The facts. He stood abruptly, straightening his tie with shaking hands. The facts are that I'm an idiot who married a con artist, who brought her into my mother's life, who nearly helped her steal everything my family has built. His voice broke. Who loved someone who never existed. I reached for him again, unable to bear his pain. Andrew, please. But he stepped away, his eyes not meeting mine. I need some air. I don't know what I need. He walked out of the conference room without looking back, his shoulders rigid with shock and humiliation. Give him time, Agent Diaz said softly. This is a lot to process. Will he be in trouble? I asked, watching my son's retreating figure through the glass walls of the conference room. Based on our investigation, we believe he was an unwitting participant, she assured me, but we'll still need his statement. As I gathered my belongings, preparing to follow the agents to their office to complete my own statement, I spotted Sabrina's handbag still sitting on the conference table. The clasp had come open during her struggle with Agent Mercer, revealing the edge of the velvet case containing the fake jewels. Such a small thing to cause so much damage. Such a small temptation to destroy so many lives. The days following the arrests passed in a blur of statements, evidence reviews, and legal consultations. The FBI investigation revealed a scope of deception far beyond what I had imagined. Sabrina, or Stephanie, as I forced myself to think of her now, had been methodically targeting wealthy families for nearly a decade, leaving a trail of financial and emotional devastation across 5 states. The real sapphires had not been found. According to the FBI, they had likely been sold through an underground network that specialized in untraceable transactions of valuable antiques and jewelry. Agent Diaz held out some hope that they might eventually surface, but warned me not to count on their recovery. These networks are sophisticated, she explained during one of our meetings. They often move items quickly to international buyers who don't ask questions. I nodded, accepting the loss. The jewels were precious heirlooms, yes, but they were still just objects. My greater concern was my son. Andrew had vanished after the confrontation at Barrett's office. He hadn't returned to the home he'd shared with Stephanie. He wasn't answering his phone. His assistant at the accounting firm reported that he had taken an indefinite leave of absence. After 3 days of silence, I received a text message. I'm safe. Need time. We'll call when ready. A. It was something at least. Proof of life. But the brevity and distance in those few words broke my heart anew. He's processing trauma, Robert assured me when I showed him the message. His entire reality has been upended. Give him space. I tried to find comfort in that perspective, but the silence of my house echoed with worry. I imagined Andrew alone in his pain, believing he had failed me, failed his father's memory, failed himself. I wanted to hold him, to assure him that none of this was his fault, that love makes fools of the wisest among us. A week after the arrests, the doorbell rang on a rainy Tuesday evening. I opened it to find Andrew standing on my porch, soaked from the downpour, his eyes red-rimmed and hollow. Can I come in? He asked, his voice rough from disuse or emotion, perhaps both. I stepped aside, wordlessly, fighting the urge to pull him into my arms. He moved past me with the careful gait of someone navigating through fog, settling on the edge of the living room sofa as if uncertain of his welcome. Would you like some tea? I offered, desperate for something normal to do, Some ritual to bridge the chasm between us. He shook his head. I came to apologize. You have nothing to apologize. 4. I brought her into your life, he said, staring at his clasped hands. I gave her access to everything. I believed every lie. I defended her when she pushed for control of your assets. I was completely, utterly blind. I sat beside him, close enough to feel his presence but not touching, respecting the invisible barrier he had erected around himself. We both were blind, I said gently. She was extraordinary at what she did, Andrew. The FBI told me she's one of the most skilled confidence artists they've encountered. She fooled everyone, not just you, not just me. But I was supposed to protect you after Dad died, he whispered. Instead, I nearly helped her steal everything you have. You didn't know. I should have known. The words burst from him with sudden ferocity. There were signs, moments when she slipped, when her stories didn't quite add up. But I was so grateful that someone like her would want me that I ignored every warning bell. My heart ached at the self-loathing in his voice. Love blinds us, Andrew. It's not a weakness. It's part of being human. He finally looked at me, his eyes swimming with unshed tears. The FBI interviewed me for, hours, showed me evidence, security footage of us at the bank, a trip I remembered as helping her deposit a check, not accessing your safe deposit box, forged documents with signatures I never witnessed, phone records showing calls to known associates in the weeks before our wedding. He drew a shuddering breath. They're convinced I wasn't involved, but how could I not have known? How could I have been so completely deceived? Because she studied you, I said, thinking of the careful way Stephanie had observed our family dynamics, noting our vulnerabilities, our patterns, our trust points. She knew exactly what you needed, exactly who to become. I keep thinking about the honeymoon, he continued, his voice hollow. She insisted on bringing the sapphires, said she wanted professional photos with them against the Aegean. I thought it was romantic. Now I realize that's when she made the switch. That's when she arranged for the counterfeits. I reached for his hand, relieved when he didn't pull away. The past can't be changed, Andrew. But you're free of her now. We both are. Am I? He looked at me with devastating honesty. Every time I close my eyes, I see her face. Every memory of the past year is poisoned. I don't know what was real and what was manipulation. I don't know if I'll ever trust my own judgment again. You will, I assured him, squeezing his hand. Not today, not tomorrow, but eventually. This wound will heal. We sat in silence for several minutes, the rain pattering against the windows, creating a cocoon of quiet around our shared pain. I've been staying at the Marriott downtown, he finally said. I couldn't go back to the house. Not with her things still there, her scent still lingering. I've asked a service to pack everything up. I'm selling the house. You don't have to make these decisions right now, I cautioned. Give yourself time. I need a clean break, he insisted. No reminders. Where will you go? He shrugged, a gesture so defeated it made my maternal instinct surge. I don't know. Maybe I'll take a sabbatical. Travel. The firm has been understanding. Stay here, I found myself saying. Your old room is exactly as you left it. Stay until you figure out your next steps. He looked around the house, the home where he'd grown up, where he'd learned to ride a bike and do algebra and recover from his first heartbreak. A place untainted by Stephanie's presence. I don't want to impose. You're my son, I said firmly. You could never impose. The ghost of a smile touched his lips for the first time. Like old times? Me hiding out in my childhood bedroom after a bad breakup? Except this time I won't limit your ice cream consumption or make you mow the lawn. He actually laughed then, a small, startled sound that seemed to surprise even him. Deal. That night, as I lay in bed listening to the familiar creaks of my son moving around in his old room, I felt a curious mixture of grief and gratitude. We had lost so much. The jewels, yes, but more importantly, our sense of security, our faith in our own judgment. Andrew had lost a future he had believed in, a love he had thought was real. But we had survived. We were together. And somehow, in exposing the lie at the center of our lives, we had found our way back to a fundamental truth, the unbreakable bond between mother and son. The following morning, I came downstairs to find Andrew already awake, sitting at the kitchen table with a cup of coffee, staring at his wedding ring which lay on the polished wood before him. I kept thinking she'd call, he said without looking up. From jail, from wherever, that she'd try to explain, to manipulate me one more time. He rolled the gold band with his fingertip. But there's been nothing. Not a word. What would you say if she did call? I asked, pouring myself coffee from the pot he'd brewed. I don't know. He finally looked up. Part of me wants answers. Part of me never wants to hear her voice. Again. I sat across from him, giving him space to process these conflicting desires. Either way, it's your choice. You don't owe her anything. Not explanations, not closure, not even anger. He nodded slowly, then picked up the ring and slipped it into his pocket. The prosecutor called yesterday. They want us both to testify when the case goes to trial. Are you ready for that? No, he admitted. But I'll do it anyway. For you, for the other victims, for myself. I reached across the table, covering his hand with mine. We'll face it together. For the first time since the confrontation, I felt a flicker of hope. The road ahead would be difficult, full of legal proceedings and painful revelations and moments of doubt, but we would walk it side by side, mother and son, rebuilding what had been broken, and perhaps in time, we would both learn to trust again. The prosecutor assigned to Stephanie's case was a no-nonsense woman named Elaine Winters, with steel-gray hair and eyes that missed nothing. She invited Andrew and me to her office 3 weeks after the arrests to discuss the upcoming trial. I won't sugarcoat this, she said after introductions were completed. Trials, like these, are emotionally draining for victims. Ms. Halbrook, as she's now identified, and Mr. Morrison have both secured experienced defense attorneys who will attempt to undermine your credibility and challenge your version of events. They're going to make me look like a fool, Andrew said flatly. They'll try, Winters acknowledged. They'll likely suggest you were aware of the scheme but are claiming ignorance to avoid prosecution yourself. They'll point to your presence at the bank during the safe deposit box visit, your signature on joint accounts, your professional background in finance as evidence that you should have known. Andrew's jaw tightened. So they'll use my career against me. It's a standard defense strategy in fraud cases involving romantic partners, she explained. Create reasonable doubt by suggesting complicity or willful blindness. And what about me? I asked. What should I expect? Winter's expression softened slightly. They'll likely portray you as a confused older woman who willingly gave gifts and then regretted it, or who misunderstood financial arrangements. They may suggest family tension between you and your daughter-in-law, painting this as an attempt to drive a wedge between her and your son. That's ridiculous, Andrew protested. My mother was the one who discovered the fraud. She's the one who worked with the FBI to expose them. Which is why we have a strong case, Winters assured him. But you both need to be prepared for unpleasant insinuations and personal attacks. The defense's job is to create doubt, however they can. Will the other victims testify? I asked, thinking of the men and families who had been targeted before us. Yes. We have 3 previous victims who have agreed to testify about their experiences. Their testimony will establish the pattern of behavior that makes this case so compelling. She shuffled through some papers on her desk. I should also mention that we've received a plea offer from Morrison's attorney. What kind of offer? Andrew asked. He's willing to testify against Halbrook in exchange for a reduced sentence. He claims she was the mastermind, that he was merely providing services without full knowledge of her broader scheme. That's convenient, I said dryly. Indeed. We're considering the offer, but with caution. Morrison's testimony could strengthen our case against Halbrook, but we're not inclined to let him off easily. He's been involved in similar schemes for nearly 15 years. As we left the prosecutor's office, Andrew was quieter than usual, his expression distant and troubled. What are you thinking? I asked as we walked to the parking garage. I'm thinking about how I'll look on the witness stand, he admitted. The clueless husband, the willing dupe, the financial professional who couldn't spot a con artist in his own bed. His voice turned bitter. It's humiliating. It's human, I corrected gently. And your honesty will be your strength. The jury will see that. He didn't look convinced, but he managed a small nod. I hope you're right. The weeks leading up to the trial were filled with preparation, meetings with Winters and her team, reviewing evidence, practicing testimony. The FBI continued their investigation, tracing Stephanie's movements over the past decade and uncovering additional victims who had never reported their losses, either from shame or the belief that nothing could be done. She was meticulous, Agent Diaz told us during one briefing. New identity for each target, different appearance, different backstory, but always the same method. Gain trust, isolate the victim from their support network, then systematically drain their assets. And my son? I asked. How did he fit into her usual pattern? He was what we call a bridge target, she explained. Someone who provided access to the real prize. In this case, you and your assets. It's actually quite common in these sophisticated schemes. The con artist builds a relationship with someone connected to wealth, rather than targeting the wealthy individual directly. I glanced at Andrew, concerned about how he would receive this assessment, but his face remained impassive. In the month since the arrests, he had developed a protective shell, analytical, detached, as if approaching the entire situation as an academic case study, rather than his own life. He had moved back to his childhood home as I'd suggested, converting the den into a temporary office where he worked remotely. In the evenings, we established quiet routines, cooking dinner together, watching old movies, occasionally playing chess as we had when he was a teenager. We rarely discussed Stephanie directly, though her ghost lingered in unspoken thoughts and careful conversational detours. One evening, as we were clearing the dinner dishes, Andrew broke our unspoken rule. "I keep wondering when I'll stop missing her," he said abruptly. Not her, the real her, but the person I thought she was, the future I thought we had. He set a plate in the dishwasher with deliberate care. Is that crazy? To mourn someone who never existed? No, I said, thinking of how I had mourned James. Not just his physical presence, but the future we had planned, the years we would never share. You're grieving a loss. The fact that it was based on deception doesn't make the grief less real. He nodded, visibly relieved by my understanding. Sometimes I dream about her. In the dreams, she's still Sabrina. Kind, loving, the woman I married. And when I wake up, I have to remember all over again. I reached for his hand, wet with dishwater. The dreams will fade. The pain will dull. Not today, not tomorrow, but eventually. You sound like Dad, he said with a faint smile. That's what he always said when I was dealing with something difficult. Not today, not tomorrow, but eventually. He was a wise man, I agreed, feeling James's presence between us, comforting ghost, unlike the toxic specter of Stephanie. 2 days before the trial was scheduled to begin, Winters called with unexpected news. Stephanie had agreed to a plea deal. She'll plead guilty to multiple counts of fraud, identity theft, and conspiracy, Winters explained, in exchange for her cooperation in recovering some of the stolen assets and identifying additional co-conspirators. We're recommending a sentence of 15 years. 15 years? Andrew repeated. That's less than I expected. Without a plea, we were looking at perhaps 20 to 25, Winters acknowledged, but her cooperation could help us dismantle a significant network of fraudsters and potentially recover assets for multiple victims. The FBI considers this a priority. What about our sapphires? I asked, already knowing the answer. I'm sorry, Mrs. Pierce. She claims they were sold immediately after the theft to a buyer in Eastern Europe. We're attempting to trace them, but realistically the chances of recovery are slim. After the call ended, Andrew and I sat in silence, absorbing the news that there would be no trial, no public testimony, no opportunity to confront Stephanie directly. Are you relieved? I finally asked. He considered the question carefully. Part of me is. No cross-examination, no public humiliation. He paused. But part of me wanted to face her, to look her in the eye and ask why, to make sure she saw the damage she caused. Would any answer she gave have been satisfying? I wondered. Would any explanation have been enough? Probably not, he admitted. But at least it would have been something. Now it feels unfinished. I understood that feeling all too well. When James died, the abruptness of his departure, a heart attack while jogging on a perfect spring morning, had left me with a profound sense of incompletion. No chance to say the things that mattered. No opportunity for proper goodbyes. Sometimes closure doesn't come from the person who hurt us, I said softly. Sometimes we have to create it for ourselves. Andrew nodded, contemplating this truth. I think I need to see the house one more time. Our house. Before the sale closes next week. Would you like me to come with you? He hesitated, then shook his head. I think this is something I need to do alone. The following day, while Andrew was visiting his former home, Agent Diaz called with a request. Stephanie had agreed to a monitored meeting with me as part of her cooperation agreement. She says she has information about the sapphires that she'll only share with you directly, Diaz explained. We can't force you to meet with her, of course. This is entirely your choice. My initial instinct was refusal, What could Stephanie possibly say that would matter now? What game was she still trying to play? But curiosity, and perhaps a desire for my own form of closure, led me to agree. I'll meet with her, I decided, but I want Andrew to know nothing about this. He's finally beginning to heal. I won't risk reopening that wound. 2 days later, I found myself in a stark conference room at the Federal Detention Center, waiting for the woman who had nearly destroyed my family. Agent Diaz sat beside me, a silent support and witness. When Stephanie entered, escorted by a guard, I barely recognized her. Gone were the designer clothes, the perfect makeup, the warm smile that had so charmed us all. In their place was a thin woman in a beige jumpsuit, her dark hair pulled back severely, her face pale and drawn. She sat across from me, her handcuffed wrists resting on the table between us. For a long moment, she simply studied my face, as if searching for something. "Thank you for coming, Margaret," she finally said, her voice lacking the warmth I remembered. "I wasn't sure you would." "I didn't come for pleasantries," I said, meeting Stephanie's gaze directly. "Agent Diaz says you have information about my family's sapphires." Ghost of her former smile flickered across her face. Always straight to the point. I admired that about you, you know, even when it complicated things for me. "The sapphires," I repeated, refusing to be drawn into her manipulation. She leaned back slightly, the handcuffs clinking against the metal table. "They're not in Eastern Europe. That's what I told the prosecutors because that's what they expected to hear. The truth is more complicated. I'm listening." "I never sold them," she said simply. "Not the sapphires, at least. The other pieces, yes, the emerald ring, the Victorian brooches. But the sapphires, I kept them." I stared at her, disbelieving. "Why would you keep the most valuable pieces?" "Because they were beautiful," she answered, a strange sincerity in her voice. "Because they had a history. Because every time I looked at them, I could imagine being someone who inherited such things rather than stealing them." She paused. "I've never kept anything before, from any job. It was unprofessional." "Where are they now?" I asked, trying to ignore the bizarre intimacy of her confession. "In a storage locker in Cincinnati, under the name Sarah Harmon." She recited an address and unit number, which Agent Diaz quickly noted. "The key is in a magnetic box attached to the underside of the stairwell railing, 3rd floor. Agent Diaz looked skeptical. "Why tell us this now? Why not use this as a bigger bargaining chip with the prosecutors?" Stephanie's eyes remained on me. "Because I owe Margaret that much." "You owe me a great deal more than that," I said coldly. "Yes," she agreed, surprising me. "I do." A heavy silence filled the room. I studied the woman across from me, the woman who had called me Mom Pierce with tears in her eyes, who had brought me soup when I had the flu, who had betrayed every ounce of trust I had given her. "Was any of it real?" I asked, the question escaping before I could stop it. "Any moment? Any feeling?" She considered this, her head tilting slightly. "The affection was performance. The consideration was calculation. The warmth was strategy." She spoke with clinical detachment, as if discussing a business transaction. "But there were moments, unexpected moments, when I forgot myself, when I almost wished it could be real." "Like when?" "The day we organized your attic. Looking through the family albums, you told stories about each photo with such love, such vivid detail." Something flickered across her face. Regret, perhaps, or simply nostalgia for a particularly convincing performance. For a few hours, I wondered what it would be like to actually be Sabrina Hayes, to actually belong in your family. I refused to be moved by this. "Yet you still stole from me. You still forged my signature. You still planned to take everything." "Yes," she said simply. "That's who I am. Or who I was, I suppose." "And Andrew? Was he just a means to an end?" Her expression shifted, becoming more guarded. "At first, yes, he was the perfect target, successful, trusting, eager for connection, and he provided access to you, to the family assets." She glanced away briefly. "But he was kind, in a way I hadn't anticipated. It made things more complicated." "Did you love him?" I pressed, needing to know for Andrew's sake, for the questions he'd never get to ask. "I don't think I know what that means," she replied with unexpected candor. "Not the way you do. Not the way he does." She met my eyes again. "But I cared about him, in my way, more than I should have." "That's not enough," I said firmly. "Not nearly enough for what you put him through." "No," she agreed. "It isn't. Another silence fell between us. Outside the small window of the conference room, clouds drifted across a pale blue sky, the same sky that covered Cincinnati, where my grandmother's sapphires apparently waited in a rented storage unit. "There's something else," Stephanie said, her voice lower now. "Something I think Andrew should know, though I have no right to ask anything of either of you." I tensed, prepared for some new manipulation, some fresh pain she planned to inflict. "He wasn't a fool," she continued. "The man I married, your son, he wasn't the gullible mark the prosecutors will paint him as, that he's probably painting himself as now." "What do you mean?" "Andrew is intelligent, observant, careful. He didn't miss the warning signs because he was stupid. He missed them because he was kind." Her fingers traced invisible patterns on the metal table. "Because he believed in second chances. Because he saw someone broken and thought love could heal them." I considered her words, remembering how Andrew had always been the child who brought home injured birds, who befriended the lonely kids at school, who saw the best in everyone. "He had a theory about me," she continued softly. "He never said it directly, but I could tell. He thought I'd been hurt, that I was guarded because of past trauma. He thought if he was patient enough, gentle enough, I'd eventually trust him with my real self." A bitter smile touched her lips. "He wasn't entirely wrong, just wrong about which parts were real." "Why? Are you telling me this?" "Because I don't want him to lose that," she said with unexpected fierceness. "That capacity to see broken things and want to fix them, to believe in people's potential rather than their past. It's rare. She hesitated. "It's beautiful." I studied her, trying to reconcile the cold manipulator I knew her to be with this moment of apparent sincerity. Was this yet another performance? Another calculated move? "You've forfeited any right to concern yourself with my son's character," I said finally. "With his healing, with his future." "I know," she acknowledged, "but I'm telling you anyway." The guard stepped forward, indicating our time was ending. As Stephanie rose to leave, she looked at me one last time. "The real sapphires are exactly where I said. And Margaret," a trace of her former self, the warm, attentive Sabrina, flickered across her face. "I am sorry, not just for getting caught, for what it's worth." I said nothing as she was led away. Whatever capacity for forgiveness I possessed did not extend to her. Not yet, perhaps not ever. Agent Diaz touched my arm gently. "Are you all right?" "Yes," I said, surprised to find it was true. "I think I am." The following day, the FBI confirmed that the sapphires had indeed been recovered from the storage unit in Cincinnati, exactly where Stephanie had indicated. They were being processed as evidence but would eventually be returned to me. I didn't tell Andrew about the meeting or Stephanie's strange, belated attempt at honesty. Some burdens are better not shared, some wounds better left undisturbed. Instead, I focused on the small, daily rituals of healing that had begun to shape our lives. Andrew had returned from his final visit to his former home with a curious sense of peace. "It's just a house," he told me that evening. "Just walls and floors and fixtures. Nothing of her remains there. Nothing of us." "And that's good?" I asked, watching him carefully. "It's freeing," he clarified. "I've been haunting that place in my mind, replaying memories, looking for clues I missed. But being there, seeing it empty, it's just a structure. The life I thought I had there. It was all in my head anyway." That night, he suggested we invite Robert for dinner that weekend. "It's time I stopped hiding," he said. "Time to start rebuilding." As I watched my son begin to emerge from the shadow of betrayal, I thought of Stephanie's words. He wasn't a fool. He was kind. There was truth in that, I realized. Andrew's capacity for trust wasn't a weakness to be corrected, but a strength to be protected, even as he learned to balance it with wisdom. Perhaps that would be our path forward, not to abandon trust, but to temper it with discernment, not to reject connection, but to approach it with clear eyes, not to rewrite our pasts, but to reclaim our futures. The sapphires would come home. My son was healing. And somehow, improbably, so was I. 6 months later, on a crisp autumn morning, I stood before the mirror in my bedroom, fastening my grandmother's sapphire necklace around my throat. The deep blue stones caught the light, sending little prisms dancing across the walls. As they had that day in the attic when I'd first shown them to the woman I knew as Sabrina. The FBI had returned them 3 months earlier, along with the emerald ring, which had been recovered from a pawn shop in Chicago. The Victorian brooches remained lost, likely sold to private collectors who had no idea of their provoked. But the sapphires, the heart of our family collection, had come home. Need help with the clasp? Andrew asked from the doorway, looking handsome in a charcoal suit and burgundy tie. Please, I turned, lifting my hair as he stepped forward to secure the delicate fastening. They look beautiful on you, he said, meeting my eyes in the mirror. Just as they should. Today was a milestone, Andrew's first day back at his firm after a 6-month sabbatical. During those months, he had traveled briefly, spending 3 weeks hiking the Appalachian Trail to clear my head, as he put it. He had begun therapy, working through the complex grief and betrayal that Stephanie had left in her wake, and gradually, he had reconnected with friends, with colleagues, with the life he had temporarily abandoned. Are you nervous? I asked, turning to face him. A little, he admitted. Everyone will know, of course. If not the details, then at least the broad strokes. There will be whispers, sidelong glances. And you'll hold your head high, I said firmly. You have nothing to be ashamed of. He smiled, a real smile that reached his eyes, something that had become increasingly common as the months passed. That's what Dr. Levine keeps telling me. That shame feeds on silence and secrets. Your therapist is a wise woman. She also says I should start dating again, he added, adjusting his tie nervously. That isolation only reinforces the damage. This was new, the first mention of potentially moving forward romantically. I kept my expression neutral, not wanting to show either too much enthusiasm or concern. Do you feel ready for that? He considered the question seriously. Not yet, but I'm starting to think I might be someday. Not today, not tomorrow, but eventually. I smiled at the familiar phrase, James's words, now a touchstone for both of us. There's no rush, I assured him. The right person will be worth waiting for. We drove separately that morning, he to his office downtown, I to the courthouse where Stephanie's sentencing hearing was scheduled. I hadn't told Andrew I was attending. He had chosen not to be present, feeling he had already given her enough of his time, his trust, his life. I respected his decision, but felt compelled to witness this final chapter myself. The courtroom was nearly empty, just a few FBI agents, the prosecutors, a couple of journalists, and me. When Stephanie was let in, she looked even thinner than during our meeting months earlier. Prison had leached the vibrancy from her, leaving a pale shadow of the woman who had so convincingly played the role of my loving daughter-in-law. She noticed me immediately, her eyes widening slightly in surprise. I met her gaze steadily, one hand resting protectively on the sapphire necklace at my throat. A message, wordless but clear. I had reclaimed what was mine. Not just the jewels, but my dignity, my family, my future. The sentencing was brief and anticlimactic, 14 years with the possibility of parole after 10, owing to her cooperation. As the guards led her away, she glanced back at me one final time. I thought I saw something like respect in her eyes before she disappeared through the door. Outside the courthouse, I took a deep breath of the crisp autumn air, feeling an unexpected lightness. It was over, truly over. The legal proceedings, the uncertainty, the looking back, all finished. Now there was only forward. I decided to walk through the park before heading home, enjoying the brilliant fall colors and the sense of possibility that hung in the air. My phone buzzed with a text from Andrew. First staff meeting complete. No one mentioned it. Just welcomed me back. Maybe this won't be as bad as I thought. I smiled, typing back. Of course it won't. You're stronger than you know. As I slipped my phone back into my purse, I noticed an elderly couple on a nearby bench, holding hands as they fed the ducks. They must have been in their 80s, their faces mapped with lines of a lifetime shared, yet their eyes still held. That unmistakable spark when they looked at each other. It reminded me of James and me in our later years. The comfortable silence, the small gestures of affection, the shared history that needed no words. Someday, I hoped, Andrew would find that again. Not the counterfeit connection that Stephanie had offered, but something real, enduring, built on truth rather than manipulation. He deserved. That, we all did. That evening, we celebrated Andrew's first day back with a small dinner party. Robert and his wife, my dear friend Eleanor, and Andrew's colleague Michael and his husband David. The dining room filled with conversation and laughter, with the clinking of glasses and the warm glow of candles. During dessert, Eleanor raised her glass in an impromptu toast. To new beginnings, she said, her eyes moving fondly between Andrew and me, and to the strength that comes from weathering storms together. To new beginnings, everyone echoed, glasses touching with a crystalline chime. Later, after our guests had departed and Andrew had gone upstairs, I sat alone in the living room, the house quiet around me. My fingers traced the sapphires at my throat, feeling their smooth, cool surfaces, their weight and history. These jewels had traveled a strange journey, from my grandmother's throat to mine, from my safe deposit box to Stephanie's hidden storage unit, from evidence lockup back to my jewelry case. They had been coveted, stolen, hidden, recovered. Yet despite everything, they had found their way home. Like us, I thought, like Andrew and me. We too had been through a journey, betrayed, wounded, lost for a time. Yet we had found our way back, not to where we had been, but to somewhere new, somewhere wiser, perhaps, somewhere stronger. The doorbell rang, startling me from my reverie. It was nearly 11, too late for casual visitors. I approached cautiously, peering through the peephole. Michael stood on my porch, looking slightly uncomfortable. "I'm sorry to disturb you so late, Margaret," he said when I opened the door. "Andrew left his briefcase in my car. I thought he might need it for tomorrow." "That's very thoughtful," I said, accepting the leather case. "Would you like to come in for a moment? I could make coffee?" He hesitated, then nodded. "Just briefly, if you're sure it's not too late." As I prepared the coffee, we chatted easily about the evening, about Andrew's first day back, about mutual friends. Michael had worked with my son for nearly 7 years and had been one of the few colleagues who had reached out consistently during Andrew's absence, offering support without prying questions. "I'm glad he's back," Michael said, accepting the mug I offered. "The office hasn't been the same without him. He's fortunate to have colleagues who care," I observed, noting the genuine warmth in Michael's voice when he spoke about Andrew. We talked a while longer before he glanced at his watch and stood to leave. "I should go. Early meeting tomorrow." At the door, he paused. "Margaret, I hope this isn't overstepping, but I've been worried about Andrew. Even tonight, surrounded by friends, there's a guardedness to him that wasn't there before, a hesitation. He's been through a great deal," I said carefully. "I know, and I know time heals, patience matters, all those truisms." He smiled slightly. "I just hope he knows that not everyone will hurt him the way she did, that some people would never betray his trust." The sincerity in his eyes spoke volumes, confirming what I had suspected during dinner. His concern for Andrew went beyond professional camaraderie or casual friendship. "I think, with time, he'll remember that," I said gently. "Not today, not tomorrow, but eventually." Michael nodded, understanding the permission implicit in my words. No pressure, no rush, but perhaps someday, a possibility. After he left, I carried Andrew's briefcase upstairs, knocking softly on his bedroom door. "Come in," he called. He was sitting on the edge of his bed, a photo album open beside him. Our family album, the one Stephanie and I had looked through that day in the attic. "Michael brought your briefcase," I said, setting it by the door. "Thanks." He glanced up, then patted the space beside him. "Join me?" I sat next to him, looking down at photos of a much younger Andrew with his father, fishing at the lake, building a treehouse, graduating from high school. "I've been thinking about Dad a lot lately," he said, turning a page, wondering what he would have made of all this, what advice he would have given. "He would have said that our capacity to trust is sacred, even when it's betrayed," I said, thinking of James's unfailing belief in the fundamental goodness of people, despite evidence to the contrary. "He would have said that one person's deception doesn't negate the truth of everyone else." Andrew nodded slowly. "I went to the sentencing today," he admitted, surprising me. "I sat in the back, left before anyone saw me." "I was there too," I confessed. "In the front row." He looked up, startled, then laughed softly. Both of us there, neither telling the other. "Some things never change." "Why did you go?" I asked gently. "Closure, I suppose. To see her one last time and feel nothing." He closed the album. And I did. Not anger, not pain, not love. Just nothing. She has no power over me anymore. I squeezed his hand, feeling a surge of pride in my son's quiet strength, his resilience. "What's this?" he asked, noticing the sapphire necklace I still wore. A reminder, I said, touching the stones, that what's truly valuable always finds its way home. Andrew smiled, understanding passing between us without need for further explanation. We sat together in comfortable silence, mother and son, surrounded by the photographs of our shared past and the unwritten promise of our future. Not today, not tomorrow, but eventually we would both be whole. Again, different perhaps, marked by our experiences, wiser for our wounds, but whole nonetheless. And that, I realized, was the greatest treasure of all.